the shadowed cradle of eternity, where blood whispers secrets to the moon, a single bite can forge queens from the ashes of the Forsaken. The wind howled through the crumbling spires of Castle Ebonheart like a lament from forgotten gods, carrying the scent of damp stone and withered roses. Alara Voss, born under a blood moon in the forsaken valleys of Transylvania 3 decades past, had always been a creature of fractured light. At 29, she was a Dhampir, half human, half shadow, her veins a battlefield where mortal frailty warred with immortal hunger. Abandoned by her vampire sire in infancy, raised by nomadic hunters who saw her as both savior and curse, Alara's life had been a tapestry of isolation. Her skin, pale as frost-kissed marble, bore the faint scars of silver blades, reminders of those who feared her duality. She desired nothing more than oblivion, a quiet death to silence the eternal ache in her chest, the thirst that gnawed without mercy. Yet fate, that cruel architect, had drawn her here to the heart of the vampire realm, on a mission she rationalized as duty, to assassinate the heir who threatened her people's fragile peace. Lord Victor Draven, the vampire heir, was no monster of legend, but a sentinel of weary elegance. Over 5 centuries old, born in the opulent courts of Renaissance Florence before the plague claimed his mortal shell, Victor had chosen undeath not for power, but to protect a lineage crumbling under human wars and internal betrayals. His eyes, the color of storm-tossed seas, held the weight of guilt, for the lives he'd taken in defense of his kind, for the lover he'd lost to dawn's unforgiving light 200 years ago. Solitary by necessity, he wandered the castle's labyrinthine halls, his black velvet cloak trailing like spilled ink. Ethical to a fault, Victor abhorred the needless spill of blood, yet politics demanded ruthlessness. The Dhampir intruder, captured in the moonlit gardens, was a pawn in a greater game, a war brewing between vampire clans and the human enclaves, where betrayal festered like an open wound. Alara's wrists burned against the iron manacles as guards dragged her into the grand throne room. Candelabras flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters on the tapestried walls. The air was thick with the musk of aged wax and faint copper. Blood, always blood. She lifted her chin, her raven hair matted with sweat and dew, meeting Victor's gaze across the chamber. He sat upon a throne carved from obsidian, its edges worn smooth by centuries of supplicants and schemers. No crown adorned his brow, only a silver ring on his finger, etched with a thorny rose. His mother's relic, a symbol of love's enduring thorns that he twisted absent-mindedly, a habit born of unspoken sorrow. "You trespass in the domain of the eternal half-breed," Victor's voice resonated, low and resonant as distant thunder, laced with a sorrow that belied his command. He rose, his movements fluid, predatory grace tempered by restraint. The room's chill seeped into Alara's bones, her human half shivering while the other thrilled at the proximity of power. She had come to end him, whispered promises from her hunter kin fueling her resolve, but now, chained and exposed, doubt coiled like smoke in her lungs. "I am no trespasser," she spat, her voice hoarse from the night's pursuit. "Your kind's wars bleed into our world. End them, or I will." Lies and truths tangled in her words. She was disillusioned with the hunter's endless vendettas, her body weakened by a lingering fever from a poisoned arrow meant for her alone. Death hovered at her shoulder, invisible yet palpable, its breath a cool draft against her neck. Victor's lips curved in a mirthless smile, revealing the barest hint of fangs. He approached, the hem of his cloak whispering against the flagstones. Up close, she saw the lines of exhaustion etched into his immortal face, not wrinkles, but shadows of moral tempests. "Wars are the heartbeat of eternity, Dhampir. You, with your divided blood, should know that better than most." His fingers brushed her chin. tilting her face to the light of a nearby window where moonlight filtered through cracked panes, illuminating the faint scar along her jaw. A mark from her first kill, a vampire who had mistaken her for prey. She jerked away, heart pounding in erratic rhythm, a symphony of fear and unwelcome fascination. Why did his touch not repulse her? The hunters had taught her to despise his kind, yet here, in the intimacy of captivity, she glimpsed the solitude mirroring her own. Victor circled her slowly, the candle flames bowing in his wake as if in deference. You were sent as a message, weren't you? A Dhampir assassin, broken and bold, but messages can be rewritten. The revelation came not in words, but in the air's sudden thickening, charged with ancient rites. Victor's council, shadowy figures cloaked in crimson, murmured from the edges, their eyes gleaming with political hunger. The clan wars raged beyond these walls, rival houses vying for the throne Victor was destined to inherit, humans allying with lesser immortals in a bid to topple the old bloodlines. Alara's capture was no accident. She was leverage. Her Dhampir heritage a bridge between worlds that could either unite or destroy. He stopped before her, his breath cool against her ear. Punishment must be served for the insult to my house. His voice softened, a philosophical undercurrent weaving through the threat. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, and in that choice lay the curse of consequence. Alara's mind raced, rationalizing escape, resistance, anything to deny the pull she felt, the inexorable draw toward this solitary king who saw not a monster in her, but a reflection of his own fractured soul. In a blur of motion, Victor seized her, his fangs piercing the tender flesh of her throat. Pain bloomed, hot and velvet, blood, hers, warm and vital, mingling with the chill of his essence. The world tilted, textures assaulting her senses, the metallic tang on her tongue, the distant patter of rain against leaded glass, the thorny rose ring glinting as his hand cradled her head. Not death, but transformation, a ritual bite, punishment twisted into something deeper, a merging of bloodlines that could awaken powers long dormant. As darkness encroached, Ilara's vision blurred, Victor's face hovering like a tragic icon. "Choose," he whispered, his guilt manifesting in the tremor of his voice. "Life or the eternity we both dread." Her body convulsed, the fever breaking into fire, and in that suspended moment she wondered if redemption lay in surrender, or if this bite would crown her not as victim, but as something far more perilous, a queen in the cursed lineage, bound to him by blood and betrayal. The castle's bells tolled midnight, echoing the fracture in her soul as the first stirrings of rebirth clawed at her veins. The velvet darkness enveloped Alara like a shroud woven from forgotten dreams, her body suspended in a limbo where pain and ecstasy intertwined like lovers in a forbidden embrace. The bite's fire coursed through her veins, not as destruction, but as a forge reshaping her from within. She tasted the metallic bloom of her own blood on her lips, mingled with the ancient chill of Victor's essence, a elixir that whispered promises of power and peril. The throne room faded into echoes, the murmur of the council's voices dissolving into the relentless tolling of the bells, each peal a hammer strike against the anvil of her soul. Her heart, that frail human drum, stuttered, then surged with unnatural vigor, as if the castle itself breathed life back into her. Victor released her with a gentleness that belied the violence of the act, his fangs retracting as he caught her slumping form. The thorny rose ring on his finger caught the candlelight, its etched petals gleaming like a warning etched in silver. He lowered her to the cold flagstones, his cloak pooling around them like spilled night. Guilt shadowed his features, those storm-sea eyes flickering with the weight of centuries-old regrets. "Forgive me," he murmured, though the words were more for himself than for her. In his long undeath, He had sworn never to sire another, to spare the world the curse of his lineage's endless wars. Yet politics had demanded this ritual punishment, a bite to bind the Dhampir intruder, to twist her into an ally or a weapon against the encroaching human alliances. Now, as her body arched in the throes of transformation, he wondered if he had awakened a queen or unleashed a storm. Ilara's world fractured into shards of sensation. The fever that had plagued her for weeks, a remnant of the poisoned arrow from her hunter days, shattered like brittle ice under the onslaught of immortal blood. Her skin prickled, every nerve alight with textures she had never known. The rough weave of the stone beneath her, the faint vibration of rain lashing the windows like accusatory fingers, the subtle scent of Victor's cologne, sandalwood and aged leather, undercut by the earthy tang of earthbound eternity. She gasped, her vision sharpening to pierce the gloom, colors blooming vivid and cruel. The council members, once blurred silhouettes, now revealed themselves. Gaunt faces etched with ambition, their crimson robes whispering of betrayals past. One, a woman with eyes like polished onyx, stepped forward, her voice a silken thread. "The binding is done, my lord. She bears the mark of the lineage now. But will she serve or shatter us?" Victor's jaw tightened, his hand lingering on Ilara's shoulder, feeling the tremor of her rebirth. He had been like her once, mortal, disillusioned by the Florence court's intrigues, where plague and poison felled his family. Choosing undeath had been his redemption, a vow to safeguard the vampire realms from human crusades and clan infighting. But solitude had carved hollows in him, deeper than any blade. This Dhampir, with her scarred resolve and hidden vulnerabilities, stirred echoes of his lost lover, Elena, whose death by sunlight had taught him the fragility of love's light. "She will choose," he said firmly, rising to his full height, the authority in his tone masking the ethical storm within. To force eternity upon another was a sin he had long atoned for, yet necessity's chains bound tighter than iron. As the transformation crested, Ilara's eyes snapped open, no longer the muted hazel of her human half, but a luminous silver threaded with crimson veins, like moonlight bleeding through storm clouds. She pushed herself up, chains falling away as if rusted by her newfound strength, the manacles clattering like discarded illusions. The air hummed with her power, a Dhampir no more, but something elevated, a queen of the cursed lineage, her blood now intertwined with Victor's ancient line. Pain lingered in her limbs, a dull ache like muscles forged in hellfire, but beneath it thrummed vitality, the thirst awakening not as a monster's hunger, but as a profound aching need, for blood, for truth, for connection in this eternal isolation. She met Victor's gaze, resistance flickering in her chest like a candle in the wind. "What have you done to me?" Her voice, once hoarse, now carried a resonant timbre echoing the castle's hidden depths. Rationalization warred within her. This was punishment, a violation born of political machinations, yet the warmth of his blood in her veins felt like a bridge across her lifelong abandonment. The hunters who had raised her, stern figures in the Transylvanian wilds, teaching her to wield silver and stake with righteous fury, would brand her a traitor now. Her desire for oblivion, that quiet surrender to death's embrace, twisted into something fiercer. A will to endure, to claim agency in this cursed rebirth. The council closed in, their murmurs rising like a tide of intrigue. "The human enclaves rally with the rival clans," one elder hissed, his voice gravelly with age. "Lord Draven's heir must consolidate power. This, queen, could tip the scales in the coming war." Visions assaulted Ilara's mind, unbidden. Flashes of battles in mist-shrouded forests, where vampire legions clashed with human armies bolstered by Dhampir outcasts like her former kin. Betrayal festered at the heart. whispers of Victor's own council plotting to usurp him, using her as a pawn in their game for the throne. Victor extended a hand, not in command, but in quiet invitation, the thorny rose ring glinting as a symbol of love's inevitable wounds. You are no longer their weapon, Alara, nor mine unless you choose it. The bite was castigation, but the awakening. That is yours to wield. His words carried philosophical weight, a meditation on choice amid eternity's shadows. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, he thought, and in her eyes he saw the oscillation between light and shadow, life and the endless night. She hesitated, the intimacy of the moment thickening the air, charged with unspoken desires and moral dilemmas. The rain intensified, drumming against the ancient panes like tears unshed, while distant thunder rolled, mirroring the war brewing beyond the castle walls. Alara's fingers brushed his, a tentative touch that sent sparks through her sensitized skin. Sensual, inevitable, resisted, yet drawing her inexorably closer. In that contact, redemption flickered, a possibility born of shared solitude, but cursed by the blood that now bound them in a lineage of strife. Yet as she rose to stand beside him, a shadow detached from the council's ranks, a cloaked figure with eyes burning like embers. The punishment binds, but loyalty, that must be tested, the intruder rasped, revealing a dagger etched with runes of rival bloodlines. The blade flashed toward Alara's heart, a test of her new allegiance, forcing a choice in the heartbeat of peril. Defend the heir who had remade her, or seize the chaos for her own fractured freedom. The castle shuddered as if in protest, the first cracks of betrayal spiderwebbing through the stone, leaving Alara poised on the precipice of transformation's true cost. The dagger's arc sliced through the throne room's heavy air like a verdict from the shadows, its rune-etched blade catching the candlelight in a fleeting gleam of malice. Alara's newly awakened senses flared, time dilating into a languid crawl, the whisper of the assassin's cloak against stone, the acrid bite of forged silver mingling with the room's pervasive musk of wax and blood. Her body, still humming from the bite's alchemy, reacted before her mind could rationalize. Instinct, born of Hunter's drills and Dhampir's duality, propelled her forward. She twisted, her hand clamping around the intruder's wrist with a strength that surprised even her, bones grinding under the pressure as the weapon clattered to the flagstones. The cloaked figure snarled, eyes like smoldering coals, revealing the face of a lesser counselor, Lord Thorn, one of Victor's own, twisted by ambition into a betrayer from the rival house of Sable. Victor moved in a blur of shadowed grace, his form interposing between them, fangs bared in a rare flash of primal fury. "Traitor," he hissed, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the chamber like thunder trapped in velvet. He seized Thorn by the throat, lifting the man effortlessly, the counselor's feet dangling as gasps escaped his lips. The thorny rose ring dug into pale flesh, drawing beads of dark blood that trickled like accusations. Alara staggered back, her pulse thundering in her ears, a mortal echo now amplified by immortal rhythm, watching as the scene unfolded in stark relief against the flickering candelabras. Rain lashed the windows harder, sheets of it blurring the world beyond into a watercolor of gray and silver, mirroring the storm of doubt churning within her. Thorn's laughter bubbled, wet and defiant, even as Victor's grip tightened. "You bind a half-breed to your throne, Draven, and call it strength?" The enclaves march with Sable's legions. Humans armed with daylight wards, Dhampirs like her turned against you. Your punishment awakens a queen who will devour us all. His words hung, laced with the poison of truth, unveiling the ritual's deeper fracture. The bite had not merely elevated Alara, it had ignited a political inferno, her blood now a beacon for the wars that clawed at the vampire realm's edges. Victor had chosen this path to consolidate his heirship, to forge an unbreakable alliance against the human crusades that had razed border villages, but in doing so, he had invited the shadows of betrayal closer, his ethical restraint cracking under the weight of necessity. Alara's mind reeled, philosophical tempests raging as she touched the puncture wounds at her throat, the skin already knitting with unnatural speed, leaving a faint throbbing warmth like a lover's bruise. What was she now? No longer the forsaken Dhampir, fever-ravaged and disillusioned by her kin's endless hunts, nor fully the monster she had been taught to slay. The transformation whispered of power, a queen of the cursed lineage, her veins thrumming with Victor's ancient essence, granting visions of battles yet to come. Mist-veiled forests where fangs met silver, political machinations in hidden crypts where alliances shattered like fragile glass. Yet with it came the curse of clarity, the inevitable pull toward him. Resisted like a tide she could not outrun. She rationalized it as survival, a tool to reclaim agency from her abandoned past, but deeper, in the intimacy of shared blood, stirred something sensual and tragic. A redemption she both craved and feared, where love's light pierced the eternal night. Victor hurled Thorn against the obsidian throne, the impact echoing like a death knell, cracked spiderwebbing further through the stone as if the castle mourned its own fractures. The council scattered, murmurs rising into a cacophony of accusations and pleas, their crimson robes swirling like blood in water. "Secure the traitor," Victor commanded, his voice steady but laced with the solitude of command. Centuries of guarding his people from internal rot and external wars had honed him into this. A king who chose mercy only when it served the greater shadow. He turned to Alara, his storm-sea eyes searching hers, the guilt there a palpable texture, soft as the velvet of his cloak brushing her arm. "This is the cost of eternity," he said softly, his breath cool against her heated skin. "Choices that bind us to others, even as they tear us apart. I did not bite to claim you, but to save what remains of our world from the dawn's encroaching fire." She stepped closer, drawn inexorably, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, a touch electric, intimate in its vulnerability. The air between them thickened with unspoken desires, the scent of rain-soaked earth seeping through the cracks, mingling with the faint, coppery residue of the skirmish. Alara's heart ached with the duality of it. The human in her yearned for the simplicity of death's quiet embrace, the oblivion that had tempted her in fevered nights alone. The immortal stirred a fierce protectiveness, a will to stand beside this solitary heir against the betrayals that mirrored her own abandonment. "And if I choose to walk away?" she whispered, her voice a caress laced with defiance, testing the boundaries of this bond. Rationalization flickered. She could flee into the night, reclaim her hunter's path, but the blood sang otherwise, inevitable as the moon's pull on the tide. Victor's hand covered hers, the thorny rose ring pressing into her palm, its edges a sharp reminder of love's thorns, his mother's gift, now a symbol shared in this moment of fragile alliance. "Then the wars consume us both," he replied, his tone philosophical, compassionate in its somberness. "Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, Alara. But in choosing life, we invite the shadows to dance." The revelation settled upon her like a ritual veil. This was no mere punishment, but a crossroads where her transformation demanded fealty, not to him, but to the fractured soul she glimpsed in his gaze, a mirror to her own oscillations between light and abyss. The council's guards dragged Thorn away, his curses fading into the labyrinthine halls. But the air hummed with unrest, distant echoes of mobilizing forces beyond the castle walls. The human enclave's horns blaring through the storm, Sable's spies slithering in the fog. Alara felt the weight of it, her body alive with textures of rebirth. The chill draft whispering secrets, the velvet pulse of blood in her temples, the subtle glow of moonlight filtering through the panes, illuminating Victor's face in golden hues of old regret. Yet as they stood entwined in the throne room's hush, a deeper tremor shook the foundations. Not the storm, but a vision assaulting Alara's mind, unbidden and vivid. Herself, crowned in shadows, leading legions against the dawn, only to turn the blade on Victor in a betrayal born of her unresolved rage. The choice loomed, ethical and raw: embrace this queenhood as redemption, weaving their solitudes into something transcendent, or let the curse unravel them both in the war's merciless embrace. The bells tolled again, deeper now, as if summoning the invisible specter of death to witness her precipice, leaving her breath caught in the silence of what eternity truly demanded. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The vision clung to Alara like cobwebs in the dim corridors of her mind, threads of shadow weaving prophecies she could neither embrace nor sever. She stood frozen in the throne room's aftermath, the air heavy with the residue of violence, the sharp tang of silver dagger mingling with the earthy musk of rain-soaked stone seeping through the cracks. Victor's hand remained on hers, the thorny rose ring a cool imprint against her skin, its etched petals a tactile reminder of choices etched in blood and regret. Her body, still acclimating to the bite's forge, thrummed with an alien vitality, veins pulsing with a rhythm that echoed the distant horns of encroaching armies, her senses attuned to the castle's every whisper, the creak of settling timbers, the muffled sobs of wind against leaded glass, the faint, coppery aftertaste of her own awakening on her tongue. She pulled away gently, not in rejection, but in the necessity of space to breathe, to rationalize the inexorable pull toward this immortal who had remade her. Those images, they feel like warnings, not gifts, she murmured, her voice a silken thread laced with the timbre of her new essence, resonant and raw. The human frailty that had once defined her, fevered nights in Transylvanian wilds, abandoned by a sire who saw her as aberration, raised by hunters whose silver scars mapped her isolation, now warred with the queenly power blooming within. She desired clarity, a moral anchor in this sea of eternity, yet the bond's intimacy whispered of deeper yearnings, connection forged in shared shadows, love's light piercing the veil of solitude like moonlight through fog. Victor watched her with eyes like storm-tossed seas, centuries of ethical vigilance etched in their depths. He had chosen undeath in Florence's plague-ravaged streets, not for conquest, but to shield his kin from human inquisitions that burned villages and toppled thrones. Guilt had been his constant companion since Elena's dawn-kissed end, a lover whose memory he honored through restraint, never siring another to spare them his cursed lineage. Yet here, in Alara's luminous gaze, he glimpsed redemption's fragile spark, a Dhampir elevated to queen, her blood intertwining with his to bolster the realm against the wars gnawing at its borders. "Visions are the mind's rebellion against fate," he replied, his tone low and philosophical, carrying the weight of endless nights pondering mortality's beauty and suffering. "They show not what must be, but what we fear to become. The bite bound us, Alara, but your choice, that is the ritual that truly awakens." The council reconvened in hushed urgency, their crimson robes pooling like spilled wine on the flagstones, faces gaunt with the pallor of immortals who had long forgotten the sun's embrace. Lord Thorne's betrayal hung over them like a shroud, his interrogation yielding fragments of the larger fracture. House Sable, allied with human enclaves armed by forbidden daylight serums, plotted to unseat Victor before his coronation. Spies whispered of armies massing in the mist-veiled Carpathians, vampire legions clashing with Dhampir mercenaries, silver-tipped arrows whistling through fog like accusations from the grave. Alara felt the political currents swirl around her, her transformation no longer personal, but a fulcrum in the brewing storm. She was the heir's bound queen, a symbol to rally the faithful or a vulnerability for the traitors to exploit. As guards hauled in maps unfurled across a scarred oak table, parchments yellowed with age, inked with borders redrawn in blood, Victor traced a finger along the frontier lines, his touch deliberate, almost tender. "The humans fear our eternity as much as we dread their fleeting fire," he said, inviting her into the intimacy of strategy, his voice a cadence that blended command with confession. "They forge alliances with Sable to end the old bloodlines, to drag us into their light and ash. But with you at my side, we could bridge the divide. Your Dhampir heritage a testament to unity, not division." His words carried sensual undercurrents, the air between them charged with the texture of velvet and chill, her skin prickling at his proximity, resisting the inevitable draw even as her body leaned closer. Ilara's mind oscillated, introspective shadows deepening with each revelation. The hunters who had shaped her, stern mentors in fog-shrouded camps, teaching her to stake hearts with prayers on her lips, would see this as ultimate betrayal, her queenly awakening a descent into monstrosity. Yet disillusionment had long festered. Their wars had left her broken, fever claiming her strength while abandonment echoed in empty nights. Now, eternity offered transformation, power to protect, to choose life over oblivion's numb peace. She touched the fading marks at her throat, the skin smooth but alive with memory, the velvet pain of Victor's fangs, the philosophical whisper of his guilt mingling with her blood. "And if unity demands more blood," she challenged, her hazel-silver eyes locking onto his, the moment stretching like taffy, intimate and fraught. Rationalization crumbled. This was no mere alliance, but a love resisted, inevitable as the tide, where redemption and curse entwined like thorns on a rose. The council's debate swelled, voices rising in a symphony of intrigue, one elder advocating preemptive strikes on Sable's crypts, another urging diplomacy through Ilara's lineage. Victor silenced them with a raised hand, his authority a quiet storm. Turning to her, he extended the thorny rose ring, not as possession, but offering. "Wear it if you will stand with me. It is no crown, but a reminder, love's thorns wound deepest in eternity's garden." His solitude cracked then, a vulnerability shining through. The ethical king who abhorred needless death, marked by centuries of guarding fragile pieces against betrayal's blade. Ilara hesitated, the ring's weight symbolic, heavy with the ghosts of his past and her unresolved rage. Slipping it onto her finger, the thorns pricked faintly, drawing a bead of blood that welled like a crimson tear, absorbed into the silver. The act sealed a ritual of choice, her heart aching with the duality, human despair yielding to immortal resolve, light flickering in shadow's embrace. Sensations flooded her, the ring's cool bite, the distant rumble of thunder heralding the army's march, the subtle warmth of Victor's gaze tracing her form like a caress unspoken. Yet, as the council dispersed to fortify the castle's wards, candles guttering in drafts that carried scents of pine and impending battle, a messenger burst through the arched doors, cloak sodden and torn, eyes wild with panic. "My lord, the outer gates." Sable's forces breach under cover of storm, with human catapults hurling fire-laced boulders, and they bear a banner of a Dhampir queen, claiming your bound one as their own. The words struck like lightning, Ilara's vision resurfacing in vivid cruelty, herself at the head of rival legions. Blade turned against Victor in a betrayal woven from her lingering human frailties. Her breath caught, the precipice widening beneath her feet, choose to prove her fealty in the fray, redeeming the bond through blood and fire, or let the curse's shadows claim her, fracturing the lineage she had just awakened to. The castle trembled with the first impacts, stones groaning like souls in torment, as death's invisible presence loomed closer, demanding her answer in the roar of war. The castle's foundations quivered under the onslaught, each thunderous impact from Sable's catapults sending tremors through the stone like the agonized breaths of a dying beast. Alara felt it in her bones, the vibration syncing with the wild cadence of her reborn heart, a relentless drum echoing the chaos beyond the walls. Rain hammered the roof in relentless sheets, mingling with the acrid scent of smoldering pitch from the fire-laced boulders that arced through the night, their flames hissing into steam against the downpour. She clutched the thorny rose ring on her finger, its silver edges biting into her skin, drawing fresh pinpricks of blood that welled warm and vital, a stark contrast to the chill seeping from the flagstones. The messenger's words lingered like smoke, coiling around her vision of betrayal, herself leading the rival forces, a Dhampir queen turned harbinger of Victor's downfall, her human frailties twisted into a weapon against the one who had awakened her. Victor's face hardened in the flickering torchlight, shadows carving deeper lines into his immortal features, as if centuries of vigilance had prepared him for this fracture, but not its intimacy. He moved with predatory economy, barking orders to the council remnants, fortify the inner bailey, summon the shadow guards from the crypts, his voice a resonant anchor amid the rising din. Yet his storm-sea eyes sought hers, a silent plea woven into the ethical storm of his gaze. Trust me in this madness, or let the shadows claim us both. Guilt shadowed him still, the bite's consequence unfolding not as punishment's end, but as a ritual igniting the very wars he had sought to quell. In Florence's plague-shadowed alleys, he had chosen eternity to protect fragile alliances, only to watch lovers and kin dissolve into ash. Now, binding Alara had forged a queen, but one whose divided blood invited the abyss closer, her presence a beacon for Sable's spies who whispered of her as their prophesied usurper. Alara's body thrummed with the transformation's aftershocks, every sense amplified to excruciating clarity. The metallic tang of fear sweat from the guards, the velvet rasp of Victor's cloak as he brushed past, the distant screams of outer sentries pierced by silver arrows whistling through the fog. Her fevered weakness had shattered like fragile porcelain under the bite's fire, replaced by a strength that hummed like coiled lightning, yet it came laced with doubt's poison. She rationalized the pull toward him as survival's cunning, a strategic embrace to navigate the political maelstrom where human enclaves, armed with alchemical daylight elixirs, allied with vampire traitors to topple the old lineages. The hunters of her youth, those stern figures in mist-veiled camps who had scarred her with silver and sermons, would decry her as damned. Abandonment had taught her solitude's bite, deeper than any fang, leaving her disillusioned with their endless vendettas. Now, eternity offered agency, a chance to weave redemption from suffering's threads. But the vision mocked her. Blades turning in her hand, Victor's blood on her lips, love's light extinguished in betrayal's cold grasp. She followed him through the labyrinthine halls, their footsteps muffled on threadbare tapestries depicting ancient battles, vampire kings fallen to dawn's fury, Dhampir heroes staking hearts in righteous twilight. Candelabras guttered in iron sconces, wax dripping like tears onto the floor, illuminating fractured mirrors that reflected their forms. Victor, elegant sentinel in black velvet, his solitude a palpable cloak. Alara, raven hair tousled, her luminous eyes betraying the queenly power she resisted, the puncture scars at her throat fading into faint, silvery lines like veins of moonlight. The air grew thicker with the storm's fury, wind howling through arrow-slit windows, carrying the clamor of war, clashing steel, guttural roars, the wet thud of bodies yielding to fangs and blade. Intimacy bloomed in the chaos, resisted yet inevitable, her shoulder grazing his as they ascended a spiral stair to the battlements, a spark of heat through the chill, sensual in its unspoken promise, rationalized as alliance's necessity. Atop the ramparts, the night unfolded in cinematic horror, lightning fracturing the sky to reveal the siege's grim tableau. Sable's legions swarmed the outer moat like shadows given form, their banners snapping in the gale, crimson fields emblazoned with a thorny rose twisted into serpents, mocking Victor's relic. Human mercenaries flanked them, faces gaunt under hoods, wielding crossbows loaded with sun-enchanted bolts that glowed faintly blue, piercing the gloom to fell vampire defenders in bursts of searing light. A figure rode at their vanguard, cloaked in midnight silk, her silhouette eerily familiar. A Dhampir exile from Ilara's own scattered kin, eyes burning with fanatic zeal, shouting rallying cries that echoed Ilara's vision. The bound queen rises. She who was bitten shall unmake the heir's throne. Victor's hand found hers on the parapet, the thorny rose ring pressing between their palms, its edges drawing mutual pricks, a shared wound symbolic of love's redemptive curse. They twist your awakening into their prophecy, he murmured, his breath cool against the storm's roar, philosophical depth underscoring the urgency. But you are no pawn, Ilara. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die. Choose now, not for me, but for the light you carry in your divided soul. His guilt manifested in the tremor of his voice, the ethical king who abhorred war's needless harvest, yet led his people through its tempests to preserve eternity's fragile balance. In her, he saw echoes of Elena, not in form, but in the oscillation between despair and defiance, a chance to redeem his solitary vigil with connection's warmth. The revelation crested amid the fray, a ritual of choice, not in blood, but in action. An enchanted bolt streaked toward them, its blue fire trailing like a comet's tail, aimed at Victor's heart. Time slowed, textures assaulting Ilara, the wind's icy lash on her cheeks, the ring's metallic bite, the distant patter of rain mingling with blood's coppery mist rising from the courtyard below. Her body moved of its own accord, shoving Victor aside as she intercepted the projectile, the impact searing her arm like hellfire kissing flesh. Pain bloomed, hot and radiant, her scream lost in the thunder, but the queenly essence surged, quenching the enchantment in a flare of crimson shadow. She staggered, vision blurring with tears unshed, the wound knitting with agonizing slowness, a testament to her hybrid fragility amid immortal might. Victor caught her, cradling her against his chest, the velvet of his cloak enveloping her like a shroud turned sanctuary. "Why?" he whispered, his face inches from hers, eyes wide with the raw vulnerability of one who had lost too much to light's betrayal. The intimacy deepened, resisted no longer, her hand cupping his cheek, feeling the cool texture of skin unmarred by time, yet etched with sorrow's invisible scars. Rationalization dissolved. This was love's inexorable forge, tragic and redemptive, where suffering's beauty lay in the choice to endure together. "Because death hovers too close," she replied, her voice a husky cadence over the siege's roar, "and I choose us." Philosophical clarity washed over her. Eternity's curse was not isolation, but the moral precipice of binding souls in war's shadow, transforming pain into transcendence. Yet as Sable's forces breached the outer gate in a wave of steel and sorcery, the Dhampir rider's gaze locked onto Ilara's from afar, recognition flashing like lightning, a mirror of her past self, abandoned and vengeful, now weaponized against the lineage she had just claimed. The vision twisted anew, not her leading the charge, but forced into it by deeper betrayals within Victor's council, Thorn's whispers seeding doubt that could unravel their fragile bond. Horns blared triumphantly, the castle walls groaning under assault, as Ilara rose beside Victor, blade in hand, the weight of queenhood settling like a crown of thorns. Would this choice redeem them in the fire of battle, or ignite the curse that bound their fates in eternal strife? The storm raged on, death's invisible specter weaving through the fray, leaving Ilara's resolve teetering on the edge of Shadow's seductive call. The siege clawed at Castle Ebonheart like a beast ravenous for the heart of eternity, its roars blending with the storm's fury into a symphony of unraveling fates. Alara stood on the battlements, the thorny rose ring a searing talisman against her finger, its silver thorns embedded now in the quick of her flesh, drawing blood that trickled warm down her palm. A crimson thread binding her choice to Victor's side. The enchanted bolt's sear lingered in her arm, a throbbing echo of sacrifice, the wound half healed in the immortal fire of her veins, yet raw enough to remind her of the human fragility she could never fully shed. Wind whipped her raven hair like black banners of defiance, rain stinging her skin in icy needles, while below the courtyard churned with chaos, vampire sentries clashing against Sable's shadow legions, fangs ripping through flesh amid the crackle of blue enchanted arrows that burst like false dawns, illuminating faces twisted in agony and ambition. Victor's form pressed close, his black velvet cloak a barrier against the gale, its texture soft yet unyielding as his resolve. He had drawn a slender rapier from his side, its blade etched with runes of ancient wards, gleaming faintly under lightning's fractured light. "Stay with me," he urged, his voice a low timbre cutting through the din, laced with the philosophical gravity of one who had witnessed too many dawns claimed by war. Centuries of guarding his lineage, from Florence's plague courts to the Carpathian mists, had taught him that redemption was not in victory's blade, but in the choices that spared the soul from shadow's total eclipse. In Alara, he saw not just a queen forged by his bite's ritual punishment, but a mirror to his own solitude, abandoned by mortality's fleeting warmth, marked by guilt for the lives eternity demanded. Her intervention against the bolt had cracked his ethical armor, stirring a love resisted through rational veils of duty, now blooming inevitable as blood's inexorable flow. She nodded, gripping a scavenged silver dagger from a fallen guard, its edge humming against her palm, a relic of her hunter days that now felt like a betrayal's weight. The vision clawed at her mind's edges, insistent as the castle's groaning stones. Herself, at the vanguard of Sable's horde, the Dhampir rider's fanatic gaze her own, blade plunging into Victor's chest, amid council whispers that sowed doubt like poisoned seeds. Rationalization surged. This was the curse of her awakening, the divided blood amplifying fears into prophecies, twisting her disillusionment into potential treachery. Born under Transylvania's blood moon, forsaken by a sire who viewed her duality as abomination, raised in fevered isolation by kin who scarred her body and spirit, Alara had craved oblivion's quiet mercy. Yet the bite had ignited a fiercer desire to transform suffering into agency, to choose eternity not as damnation, but as a bridge across the abyss, where love's light pierced the eternal night with tragic radiance. They descended into the fray, movements synchronized in an intimate dance of survival, his fluid grace complementing her raw hybrid power. The air thickened with textures of war, the wet slap of blood on cobblestones, the metallic screech of steel yielding to fang, the acrid bite of smoldering pitch mingling with the earthy petrichor of rain-drenched earth. Candelabras in the inner halls flickered wildly, casting elongated shadows that writhed like specters, illuminating the Dhampir rider as she breached the Bailey gates. She was a specter from Alara's past. Lirael, an exile from the same nomadic clans, her face gaunt with vengeful zeal, eyes silvered like Alara's own, proclaiming, "The bitten queen rejects the heir's chains. Join us, sister, and unmake the cursed throne." The words struck like thorns, echoing the vision's cruel whisper as Lirael's forces surged, human mercenaries hurling vials of daylight elixir that erupted in blinding flares, felling vampires in shrieks of incinerated flesh. Alara's heart stuttered. Immoral tempest raging, allegiance to the hunter's ghost or to the bond that had remade her. Victor parried a lunging sable warrior, his rapier slicing clean through shadow-armored throat, dark ichor spraying in an arc that caught the torchlight like spilled midnight. He turned to her, breath steady despite the melee, his storm-sea eyes holding hers in a moment of profound intimacy. "The shadows tempt because they know your light," he said, voice compassionate amid the carnage, a somber meditation on memory's fragile hold. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, he thought, and in her oscillation between despair and defiance lay the beauty of human suffering elevated to transcendence. Guilt gnawed at him. The bite meant as political castigation had awakened not just power, but vulnerability, binding their solitudes in love's redemptive curse, where betrayal loomed as eternity's sharpest blade. The revelation unfolded in the heart of battle, a ritual born of choice amid the storm's howl. Lirael charged, her blade a silver streak aimed at Victor's exposed flank, her cry a twisted echo of Ilara's abandoned youth. "For the Forsaken, we end the eternal tyrants." Time fractured, senses assaulting Ilara, the velvet pulse of her blood sinking with Victor's, the ring's thorns pulsing like a second heartbeat, the distant toll of bells muffled by thunder, summoning death's invisible vigil. She moved not in vision's betrayal, but in defiant clarity, intercepting Lirael with a clash that rang through bone and steel, her dagger locking against the riders in a shower of sparks. "I am no one's pawn," Ilara growled, her voice resonant with queenly timbre, pushing back with strength that shattered Lirael's guard. The Dhampir staggered, eyes widening in recognition's shock as Ilara's free hand seized her throat, not to kill, but to force truth. "The wars consume us all. Choose life, not vengeance's grave." Lirael twisted free, retreating into the press of bodies, her forces faltering as Victor's guards rallied, shadows coalescing to repel the breach. The tide turned in crimson waves, Sable's legions crumbling under the castle's wards, their banners trampled into muddied ruin. Yet victory's hush brought no peace. Ilara collapsed against Victor, the battle's toll etching exhaustion into her frame, the wound on her arm reopening in a slow seep of blood that stained his cloak. In the quiet aftermath, rain easing to a mournful patter against the windows, they retreated to the throne room sanctuary, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and fading smoke. He tended her wound with a cloth from his pocket, fingers gentle, tracing the silvery scars at her throat. Intimate touches that spoke of resisted desires yielding to inevitable union, sensual in their tenderness, without vulgar haste. "You chose us," Victor whispered, his forehead resting against hers, the coolness of his skin a balm to her fevered heat. Philosophical solace wove through his words. Redemption lay not in eternity's isolation, but in love's transformative forge where suffering's beauty redeemed the damned. Ilara met his gaze, the thorny rose ring glinting between them, its bloodied petals a symbol of wounds shared and healed. "And in choosing, I find the light in our shadows," she replied, her voice a caress, the moral dilemma resolving into ethical clarity, eternity's curse tamed, not by power, but by the transcendence of bound souls. Yet as dawn's first gray tendrils pierced the horizon through cracked panes, a final whisper from the vision lingered. Thorn's escaped whispers had seeded deeper traitors within the council, a political serpent coiling for the coronation's eve. The wars paused, but betrayal's shadow stretched long, leaving their fragile redemption poised on eternity's knife edge. Would love's thorns crown them in unity, or draw the blood that shattered the lineage anew? The bells tolled softly, a requiem for choices yet to unfold, as death's specter retreated into the light, watching, waiting. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts.